Hi, this is Charles Bass with the USD Alumni Association. We're happy to present USD Chats with Charles, a chance to visit with alumni from all over to share their story and build community among toreros. I'm so happy today to visit with Tracy Reines, class of 1994. She's currently the Regional Director for U.S. Programs with the International Rescue Committee. The IRC resettles close to 15% of the refugees in the U.S. in a particularly dynamic and challenging environment. Tracy oversees 15 offices in 8 states to ensure refugees pursue and can achieve economic opportunities, education, health, and safety in their new home. Prior to the IRC, she has led responses to close to 200 disasters in 75 countries since 2000, including deploying people, supplies, services, and funding. As the former director of the American Red Cross International Response Operations Center, she oversaw over $500 million in humanitarian assistance distributed to roughly 5 million beneficiaries, including victims of hurricanes, earthquakes, and tsunamis. She has also served as a teacher trainer in the Peace Corps and has a master's degree from Harvard. The USD Alumni Association was very pleased to recognize Tracy in 2019 with the Bishop Charles Francis Buddy Award, saluting her service to humanitarian causes. Tracy, it's very good to see you and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you again, Charles.
Well, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm here in just outside of New York City, right in the middle of this COVID-19 outbreak in the middle of April. So it's been quite a month here in the city, and sort of being a part both of the response to our clients, but also as a person impacted and affected by it as well. But we're hanging in.
I believe you moved to New York City in the aftermath of the 9/11 attack. So basically jumping into a place to work in disaster relief when lots of folks were heading the opposite way. So talk a little bit about that work and maybe about how things are going there in New York today, knowing it's one of the epicenters here with a different type of crisis.
Yeah, I did. After grad school, I came to New York City to support the response to September 11th, and was here for about 2.5 years during that time, and then left to go back overseas into DC to work for the Red Cross, and then moved back here to New York about 3 years ago again. So the question that comes up a lot is sort of comparing this situation now with the COVID context. And sort of September 11th, or even Hurricane Sandy, which I was also here responding to. And, you know, what I think that I would highlight is, as many people are probably seeing our governor on TV quite a bit and talking about New York strong and what that really means, and you know, being New York tough, in terms of being sort of tough and being able to navigate things and show up and really be able to get through difficult situations. But he also keeps saying it also means being loving and being human. And I just can't stress that enough. I mean, it's no big surprise to folks that I love this city very deeply and feel so fortunate to be able to call it my home on a couple of different occasions and now. But, you know, it is a tremendous, tremendous city on all fronts, both in terms of its leadership, its attempts to be forward-thinking in its response to crises, as well as the people, individuals that are in the city and how we respond. So, you know, there are similarities, of course, to, you know, September 11th and Hurricane Katrina, but differences as well that we can talk about a bit more. But I will just say the through line is that this town and this city is a phenomenal place to be under the best circumstances and even under the worst circumstances. So.
Well, you'd certainly shed blood, sweat, and tears on behalf of the city, I know, and the people of the city. So your work and your spirit continues to amaze me. Tell us a little more about your role with the International Rescue Committee.
Yeah, so thanks. So I came about 3 years ago, and as you mentioned, thank you at the beginning, our organization, International Rescue Committee, was founded by Albert Einstein about 85 years ago. And it was founded on the premise of supporting refugees post World War II here and founded here in New York City. So our whole premise is sort of from harm to home, and it's an international and a U.S. focused organization that provides services to people who are impacted by natural and man-made crises, and who are fleeing or are impacted by being displaced and outside of a service provision or access to safe environments in which to work and to thrive and to learn and to grow. And so we have, I think, over 40 countries internationally that we work in, and then here in the United States, um, in close to 30 cities in 15 different states. And my role in the US side of our work is providing services to refugees and new Americans who are recently arrived into the US. Without getting into too many details, but it's sort of asylum seekers but mainly driven by refugees who are deemed refugees by the UNHCR, the UN system, and who come to the US legally in seeking sort of refuge and a home in the US. And so we provide, as you mentioned, about 15%, a good significant portion of the people who come into the US, everything from the basic sort of picking people up from the airport, but all the way through health, access to health services, education services, enrolling in school, first access to first jobs and means of employment, safe apartments and places to live. And then when those acute needs are met, we can provide services up to a few years down the road that are more encompassing, like support through education, helping people bridge a digital divide and have computer literacy, economic empowerment, and able to navigate a banking system, financial system, health system. So just a whole slew of services and support that we help provide and connect people to in their communities all across the country. So I love it.
Yeah, I was going to point out, and I'm sure a lot of people know, but you don't just work in New York City. And even though it is a city full of people from all over the world, you are in small town Kansas and around the country, finding ways to help these.
That's exactly right.
Who come to you at their lowest point, probably.
That's exactly right. And we do have a really robust office actually in San Diego. So I want to give a good plug for our USD alum. We do have an office in San Diego that does fantastic work as well.
That's great. And you talked about New York tough. I should have mentioned I live in downtown San Diego, and every night at 8 o'clock we have this there's this hooting and hollering. I don't know if they're doing that in New York City as well.
They are doing it at 7 o'clock at night. I am very gleefully hooping and hollering with everybody as well. I think it's ostensibly, to acknowledge sort of healthcare workers and then essential workers who are doing, especially in New York City, where so much is based on, we live in small apartments, right? And so we really depend on small shops and restaurants and these stores that provide, and laundromats and laundry services and all of these services that in New York are sort of outsourced a little bit more than maybe they are in other places. And so those workers and those people who are, helping the city continue to function, obviously at a risk to themselves as well, is just a really incredible thing to see, and something that I think the city really goes out of their way to try to acknowledge and celebrate. And it is also a little bit of sanity, right? So anytime you can kind of lean out your window and bang a pot and hoot and holler is not a bad time. So I hope it goes on way past COVID, to be honest.
Oh, I do too. There's even the building across the way has a professional DJ, I Am Noel, and he's doing DJ sets every Saturday night at 8. So if you want to, tune in.
Yeah, we've got. I've seen a few clips here of people who are, from the theater who are, sort of singing and all these great, incredible ways of both creativity and community that's coming out of this. That's just really neat to be a part of. Yeah.
So on a good day, when there's not a global pandemic,
right.
Your work had to be extremely stressful. And in the last couple of years, travel bans and debate over immigration and has certainly caused, I'm sure, even added grief for you and your colleagues. So how are you all dealing with all that plus this pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair question. I would say this. My work has always been either directly or adjacent to sort of bad things that are happening, right? I mean, that's just kind of the career path I'm not sure I intentionally chose, but that's where it's been. And the reason that you can stay in it for 10 years or 15 years and be sane and be hopefully relatively healthy is to see some of the good elements of that, and the streaks of light and the streaks of beauty and the streaks of resilience that people demonstrate every day. And I don't mean to say that as a cheerleader. I mean, I think that is really the crux of it. And people ask that all the time. And how do you do this work for that long and not, kind of feel like the sky is falling? But I would say that, for all of that pain and challenge and disappointment and frustration, you also see people who are incredibly resilient and who are incredibly creative and who find the good in people and find the good in opportunities and really build on that. And that's what I found, whether it was sort of in a natural disaster, in the Philippines or in Haiti, or if it's, now when we have some real challenges, external challenges to some of the work that we do on a regular basis. That said, it has been an incredibly difficult 3.5 years. There's no surprise there. And in real tangible ways, both in terms of, rhetoric, but also in terms of, numbers of people and, resources associated, and sort of politicizing things in a way that hasn't historically been the case. So it's been tough waters to swim in for the last 3 years. And I feel like we've gotten through quite a bit of it with our heads high and feeling good about our work. And for this to happen now to the entire, obviously it's far reaching, no one is untouched by it. It feels heavy and it feels difficult. And in some ways, like, really, like this too, I mean, that said, the pivot that we have all done, and my organization in particular that I know personally has done in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks is phenomenal. I mean, to go from 3 weeks ago, making sure we all had hand sanitizer and, maybe I should work remote more often, to a full 180 of the content of the work you're doing having to be changed, what it is that you're actually doing and providing. And we're a social service agency. We deal with people, and so all the things that go with that, what are we going to do? What do people need? How are we going to provide it? How are we going to do it from a distance that's safe for them and us? How are we going to communicate that with people who may or may not be particularly computer literate? How do we reach people and make sure that we are giving information in a way that's translated and understood appropriately, which you can imagine all the lost in translation things that can happen. You can imagine people in some places that might already be viewed a certain way, now with some of the ideas of how different people can be perceived differently. I mean, all of that happening at once, plus the external context that we're all navigating ourselves, plus on an individual level, working from home, getting ourselves set up, dealing with our families, dealing with people who may or may not be vulnerable to COVID, being sick ourselves, having anxiety. So, all of that happening in a 2, 3, 4 week period, and then also being in New York City during all of that, I'm just incredibly humbled and proud of people that I personally work with from our organization up and down the line who've made that transition so gracefully and with such intention and focus on people we're trying to serve, that it's really humbling. I'm really so proud to be part of it. It's great.
That's really wonderful. I mean, all kinds of people years from now are going to write all these papers and books about resilient organizations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think about USD going from, we might consider going remote to 10 days later fully be, all our students are online. 2,600 students have been moved out of the residence halls,
right.
And found places. Those who didn't have a place to go were they were taken care of. So it's a tribute, but it's also it's kind of awe-inspiring as well.
It is. And you wouldn't think that people could do that. I mean, if you said that, if you had to plan for that, your head would explode, right? And then when it had to happen, it happened. And so I just, people are resilient.
You probably have many, and I might be putting you on the spot here, but can you share an inspiring story from your recent times, your recent work that would be a highlight for you?
Yeah. I mean, again, we're a social service agency, so we often think about, what can we do for people, and what, how can we help? How can we help? We always have to intentionally and explicitly pause and say, what can actually people do, not just for themselves, but to contribute also the other way, right? And how does that work? And how do we not forget that in our kind of natural position of like, what do we do for people? But, what can people do in the other way? And so, I'm really, really proud of my organization and colleagues that I work really close with who've set up a platform that allows new Americans and refugees who have certifications and qualifications in the medical field to sign up and to have their credentials, of course, checked and confirmed and all of that, obvious things, but to actually give a platform by which they can enter into the healthcare world at various levels, be it from doctor, down to other ways, to really engage and be participants in providing, healthcare to people who need it. And generally speaking, most people who are, new Americans, their certifications don't transfer. That's a longstanding reality in our immigration system. So if you're, everyone knows the story of the doctor, from XYZ country who's now a taxi driver, right? Because their credentials don't transfer. So we've done a lot of work to try to mitigate that and to give a platform for people to volunteer if they have those credentials and have that desire to engage, and then a way to get them into the system to be able to contribute and help and bring their skills and knowledge and desire to I wouldn't call it give back, but to participate, in this response in the US. And I think it highlights so many things that I love about people and international work and us as a global entity to take advantage of it and to facilitate that. And I'm thrilled about it. I'm so proud of it. And I'm really proud of my colleagues who have set that up and to be a small part of helping make that happen. So we're really excited about that. All across the country. So it's not limited to here for sure.
That's fantastic.
It's great.
Can you think of ways that that your fellow alumni can help the cause, whatever that cause specifically might be, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a couple things just on an individual level. I mean, one is I hope when I get back to sort of the silver lining or some of the, lessons from these kinds of things is I hope it highlights the humanity of people, right? I hope it just reminds people that we are literally all in this together and we literally cannot or should not be as skewed by kind of, our focus of who people are and what they need and the differences that we have. I don't want to sound too Pollyanna, but I do really think that you can come out of these things realizing that we are all vulnerable. We are all, necessary as part of a network of humans and community and culture that should be looking less at our distinctions and more of just the fact that we're part of this world together. And so just on a very individual level, I just encourage and remind us to think about that, right? And to not think about, sort of where someone came from or what language they speak or how long they've been here, but that we are all part of this and that we need each other. And that on an individual basis, by our actions, by our talk, by the way we engage with people on an everyday basis really does matter. And so honestly, at just a very individual level, I just want to remind us all of that. On a more tangible level, I do believe that, charity starts at home and that you should start local, and that if there are organizations that are, speak to you in a way that you feel compelled to either contribute your time or your goods or your, other resources, money, is always a good place to start. Organizations need that, and we can survive on likes and sharing information, but we also need, resources, and that can be time or goods or money. If the IRC and the work that we do is one of those organizations, rescue.org is definitely a place to look. And if you go on that website in San Diego is the place that you want to look. There's certainly a link to our San Diego office, as well as any of the offices around the country. But yeah, I think it starts at home, and I think individual actions and your energy and the way that you look and speak and talk to people is a start. And then if organizations speak to you, look at the local ways to engage. And if IRC is one of them, please go to rescue.org.
Yeah, that also helps you get out of your head. We've talked a little bit about being kind of, this self-isolation is challenging for some. I'm a very extroverted person. I knew I was, but I wasn't sure how much until I'm not allowed to talk to people. And see
I've been
them.
talking to the gardeners. I've been talking to the people picking up anyone who's around. I'm like, hello.
I have a balcony, and every bird that comes gets a full-on conversation. So
I know.
when they start talking back, then I'm going to be in trouble. But
definitely get excited for that 7 o'clock holler. So.
All right. So let's think about, we hear a lot about self-care these days. So two-part question. The first part is, what are you doing? The second part, the most important part is, what are you binge watching?
Yes. Good questions. Good questions. Okay. So I think that a couple things. So I'm like you, Charles. I mean, I'm an extrovert, and I like people and get energy from people. So I'm one of those people that probably has, at least 2 Zoom calls a night set up with friends and family. And I'm loving that, to be honest with you. I mean, I think, there's lots of jokes about it and people get tired and bored of it or whatever, but I think that it is a phenomenon. I've talked to people who I haven't talked to in 10 years. I've talked to my family and all of my cousins in a way that I haven't done in, ever. So I am a big believer in, being where you are and accepting what is happening around you and not fighting it. And that doesn't mean that you have to be hyper productive, but it does mean if I'm staying home, let's talk to folks and let's engage with folks. And I'm loving that, to be honest. And I'm sure for some folks that might be a little much, but I'm a big believer in it, big fan of it, and I'm doing it, not just because I'm an extrovert, but also just because that's kind of what there is to do at the moment. So
Yeah.
I'm embracing that for sure. I also try to keep one night a week where I'm not doing it, so I'm not going crazy.
A lot of screen time these days.
Yeah, a lot of screen time. I also, as I said, I think the second thing is let's not fight it. I mean, I'm sure, again, there's gonna be plenty of articles about, there's value in slowing down a little bit, and there's value in just kind of being where you are and accepting it. And maybe, of course, sometimes you're bored, but you're lucky to be bored because there's lots of people who are really struggling and fearful how they're going to pay their rent. So if your biggest problem is boredom, that's really not a problem.
Right.
I'm a big believer in kind of being where you are, and just if that means slowing down, don't fight it and get grumpy and, belabor it, because as soon as we go back, you're going to say, I wish I had more time to do A, B, and C. So yeah, so I'm on that phase. I've been doing a lot of cooking. I've cooked for some friends. I definitely take walks when I can, socially distanced, of course.
Yes.
All the stuff, the normal stuff. But my main thing, I think, is just to not fight it and to be grateful for time, because we always complain we don't have enough time. So
That's
now we
true.
have it. So go
now
for
we
it.
got it.
Do it.
I was telling somebody I was so excited to talk to you today, and it was great having you at Alumni Honors a couple years ago. And I described you as the walking embodiment of a smile. I mean, you just bring this energy. It's so awesome. And then when we met again in New York City, it was the same. So
that's really kind.
But that doesn't get you out of the binge watching question.
Well, the funniness, so now I'm like a walking smile, and I'll tell you what I'm binge watching, rewatching again, which is like the opposite of a smile, but it's the best show ever done, is The Wire.
Oh,
and
yes.
If you have not ever watched The Wire from HBO from 10 years ago, it is certainly not something that often brings a smile, but it is one of the best shows ever produced, and it is one of the best things that is good to watch again, because it's so dense and so smart and so layered and so and now that anyway, it's a very good show to watch for the first time, and if you have watched it, I would put it up there to watch it again, because it's just one of the best shows ever done, and it deserves another viewing if you haven't or if you have or haven't seen it. So I'm loving that.
I haven't seen it as much as I would like to, so I'm gonna watch it. That's the second time somebody's recommended it lately.
Yeah.
All right, so for the last part, I didn't steal. I was inspired by the great work of the great Alan Alda, who has an amazing podcast that I've gotten into more lately called Clear and Vivid, and he's all about about communication, particularly as it pertains to scientists communicating so that people can understand. And it's more relevant now than ever. So it's a great podcast called Clear and Vivid. It's also, it's smart, it's entertaining, and it's quite funny. All things I aspire to be at some point in my life. So he ends with 7 questions that he asks. And
before you ask, I'm just going to say I'm laughing because I literally, wrote to someone today, we should have a webinar on how to speak clearly and be heard, and the target audience was sort of IT people and finance people. Like, how are you really trying to communicate what you're trying to tell me? Because I'm having a tough time. So anyway, I love that. Clear and Vivid. I'm looking.
That's brilliant. Yeah, Clear and Vivid. So I'm not going to ask 7 questions. It's just 3 easy questions, kind of to help get to know you a little better. So, and again, they're easy. So, number 1, can you name a book or movie that inspired you, and why?
One of my favorite books, well, and it was a movie, so maybe this is a twofer. One of the books that moved me the most in my life is The Hours by Michael Cunningham. And, I would think that the inspiration element, or the thing that moved me so much, is this idea of connectivity over time. It basically tells the story of 3 women in different phases of their lives, and they turn out to be connected in some ways, but basically it's a story of sort of Virginia Woolf and a woman in the 50s and then a woman in the 80s and different women. But the idea of, struggles and experiences that are timeless and that can move and affect you no matter who you are, where you are, when you are, is again this idea that we all have some innate similarities or innate desires and innate vulnerabilities that, no matter, what time frame or your circumstances are present. It just always is. It's one of the most moving books I've ever read for sure. And I thought the movie did it justice as well. So The Hours, I would say.
That was actually a harder question. I made it sound a lot easier.
Oh,
this one is easy, I think. I'll just stop assigning a value to these questions. But so you're an East Coaster now, clearly a New Yorker. But when you do find yourself back in San Diego, you've also lived around the world and you've traveled everywhere. And you just said you like to cook. So if you're back in San Diego, what's your go-to meal?
Oh my God, Mexican food, without a question. I mean, the joke is, Mexican food and sushi. When I go home to my family's house, my dad, I was like, all I want, it's right on the to-do list. It's like In-N-Out burger, sushi from a certain place, but Mexican food, anytime those other two aren't on the agenda. And I say that, I've learned to not force the issue and not try to get Mexican anywhere else outside of, Southern California. So without question, Mexican. Oh God, I miss it.
That's great. Yeah, I'll see if I can ship you a taco. So.
Oh my gosh, Alberto, please, Alberto's.
Alberto's.
I'm standing by. Yeah.
Yep.
My dad actually has FedExed me, or he has flown over with a couple burritos for me before.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, here's a 2A. What tonight you have to make some comfort food. What would you make?
Yeah, that's a very good question because that is next on the agenda. This is going to sound self-serving, but I do have to say, especially now when kind of food is, I don't know, you should be mindful of how many times you go to the store and all that stuff. I am such a huge fan of a good, wonderful, robust salad, and it's going to sound a little too.
I said comfort food.
I know. Okay, listen, I need some greens. I like a big giant salad. On the side of that, I'll do some angel hair pasta with some a really good olive oil and delicious Parmesan, which is always on hand in my house. So
all right.
If that's a more realistic, yeah.
And I shouldn't judge. Whatever you find comfortable is great. So
salad does not sound, I know what you're getting at, but it is true right now.
This was a good interview. Until then, salad is a comfort food.
All right, pasta.
We'll edit that out. We'll put in something fried.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last question.
Yeah.
This is all about USD, of course. What is your favorite place on the USD campus?
Listen, I think that I had the best dorm room in the history of USD. I'm not going to lie. My freshman dorm room was right at the top of the arch in Camino. So it looked right out out towards campus. And this is when you could still drive up and down campus, but it was right over the arch. And then I was fortunate, to my roommate, but my freshman roommate moved out kind of at this time where it was late enough that they never gave me a new roommate. So I ended up having a single room. And it was fantastic. And anyone who knows me from college knows that was the best room for freshman year, 1990. And I'm going to stick by that. Camino, I can't remember the number, but Sister Lorch was my RA. And I loved that. I was so lucky in that dorm room. I will always be grateful for that. It shaped my whole freshman year. I loved it.
Oh, that's fantastic. So just a news update. If you come back campus, say in mid-June or July, Camino and Founders are going to be closed. In 1990, there was probably some deferred maintenance, and that deferred maintenance exists today in 2020. And so we've got this massive project called the Torero Renaissance Plan. And next up is a full renovation of Camino and Founders. You won't really notice that much because it's mostly behind the walls.
Mm-hmm.
But so in August of 2021, come back and we'll have a grand reopening.
I'll cut the ribbon myself if I can. I had such a wonderful time living there, and I was, every time I go back to campus, I literally look at it and smile. So I loved it.
That's so good. Well, Tracy Reines, thank you very much for your time. And again, to learn more about the International Rescue Committee and their important work, visit rescue.org. And you can also learn more about the USD Alumni Association at our website, which is alumni.sandiego.edu. So Tracy, thank you very much. Stay healthy and stay safe.
You too. Thanks so much, Charles. Thanks for having me. It's good to connect with USD. Thanks so much.